Hello! Today we're going to be taking a look at the Ryobi P208 half-inch drill driver from Ryobi. Now this drill driver has been discontinued, but I think it's actually still a fairly decent drill driver to maybe take a look at, especially if you found one used that's in good condition at like a pawn shop, or if you're looking to buy one that's in pretty new condition off Amazon or eBay. So overall, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll go through some of the reasons why I think this is still a decent drill driver to take a look at. Okay, starting off at the bottom of the tool, we have the 18-volt battery slot, which will accept any of Ryobi's 18-volt batteries. Overall, the battery slot is as good as it gets on Ryobi. I've never had an issue with the battery falling out as long as the battery's been fully inserted and it clicks into place. So overall, the battery slot gets a pass. And next up, we have the bit holder. Now, the bit holder was a feature that you would find on pretty much all the old generations of, well, Ryobi drill drivers, impact drivers. However, with the newest generation of drill drivers, impact drivers, Ryobi has opted to remove this in favor of a weak light. And I do mean a weak light. So overall, I really do prefer having the bit holder. I know some people don't particularly like it, but for me personally, I love having the bit holder, and I find it to be very useful, and it actually does a very good job at holding the bit in place. And it's very useful for when you need to switch in between two different bits and you don't want to be fumbling through your pockets trying to figure out where the bit is. So yeah, I still love this feature, and I still wish Ryobi included it, but this drill driver is old enough to still incorporate it, so I think this is another great feature of this particular drill. Okay, next up we have the LED light. Now the LED light is located directly above the bit holder, and overall it's not a very bright light. It really doesn't provide all that much illumination unless the object you're working on is directly in front of the drill, and it really won't give you much area light other than that, unfortunately. But at the same time, I am glad they decided to include it, and it is useful, and it has been durable over the years. I've never had an issue with it burning out or anything, so overall, I've been fairly happy with just how well it works. Now, the light will become activated when you pull the trigger, and it'll turn off as soon as you release the trigger, so there's no sort of delay that is included when you release the trigger, so that's just something else to keep in mind. But overall, it's not the most useful light in the world, but at least it's there, so it gets a pass. And next up, we have another great feature that Ryobi opted to get rid of, the mag tray. Now, the mag tray on this particular drill actually did a fairly decent job at keeping any sort of fasteners or bits in the tray where they belong. Now, about the only time that it would lose any sort of fasteners or bits is if you put too many in the tray, or if you had too many sharp motions and something might go flying out, which is fairly typical with most magnetic designs, at least when they're not super rare earth magnets. But at the end of the day, the mag tray was very useful, and it's still a feature that I really enjoy and I really miss on some of Ryobi's newer drills, and that's one reason why I actually still use this drill fairly often. So at the end of the day, the mag tray still gets a pass from me. And next up, we have the strap point. There's a strap point on the rear of the tool, and that's about all I can say about that. If you want to use it with a strap, you can. I personally would have traded the strap point for a belt clip, but that's just my own personal preference. So yeah, moving on. And next up, we have the grip. Now, the grip on this particular tool is a pistol style grip, and it's plenty big for my hand, and quite frankly, I don't have any complaints when it comes to the size. Now, the rubberized texture is a little bit different than the rubberized texture that you'll find on the newest generation of Ryobi tools, but it's not exactly that bad either. I think the newer rubberized texture is a little bit more comfortable and a little bit easier to grip, but this has been holding up for years, and while it has worn down in a couple spots, it hasn't been flaking off or coming unglued or anything like that, so it's already done better than several other power tools I've had over the years. And so, quite frankly, I'm perfectly happy with just how well it's held up. So at the end of the day, I really do like the rubberized texture on this particular drill, and I like the grip as well, so it gets a pass. And next up, we have the trigger. Now, the trigger on this particular tool, well, it was one of the last really high-quality triggers that Ryobi decided to have on one of their drills. This particular drill trigger was made out of a fairly durable plastic with a rubberized texture on the front of it, which was very comfortable to hold and would help prevent your finger from slipping off if your hands were sweaty or wet. And, well, if you look at today's drills from Ryobi, they all pretty much have the exact same looking hard plastic trigger that has a molded grip on it that doesn't have any sort of rubberized texture, and they don't feel nearly as nice as the trigger on this particular drill. So overall, the trigger really is something good on this particular drill. Now, over the years, like on most drills, the trigger has become a little bit gummy, but it's still very easy to control. I don't have very many complaints about just the overall control of the trigger. So it gets a pass, even though it is a little bit gummy now. So yeah, moving on. And next up we have the selector switch. The selector switch is, well, it's a typical Ryobi selector switch. It's made out of hard plastic and it does its job just fine, and there really are no bells or whistles when it comes to that, although I'm not sure how many bells and whistles you can actually include in a selector switch. When you push it all the way to the left, that means that you're drilling in the forward position, and when you switch it all the way to the right, that means you're in the reverse position, and in the middle is the lock position. Overall, it's located high enough up that you're not going to accidentally bump it with your fingers, and it's also protected by the curvature of the body, so you're not going to change it when you bump it against something, as long as it's not something that's bumping against it too low. So overall, it gets a pass in my book. And next up we have, well, a level. It's located at the top of the tool near the rear, and, well, I guess it's a useful feature for some people. For me personally, I never used this feature really, except for maybe once or twice. And yeah, I just don't think it's all that useful, and it's completely disappeared off all the newer models of drills from Ryobi. But this model does have it, so if that's something that is interesting to you, well, it's there. So yeah, moving on. Okay, next up we have the gear selector switch. The gear selector switch is located at the top of the tool, like on pretty much every other drill on the market. And you have two different gear options to choose from. You have first gear, which will provide more torque but slower speeds, and then you have second gear, which will provide higher speeds but less torque. Overall, the selector switch works just fine, and I don't have any complaints about it. And it actually has a nice rubberized texture, which you will not find on some of the newer drills from Ryobi. So overall, the selector switch is perfectly functional, it's easy to switch back and forth, and it's not too stiff, which is a problem that I have noticed on several drills from Ryobi. So it's nice that this one does not have that issue. So at the end of the day, it gets a pass for me. And next up we have the clutch. Now the clutch on this particular drill is a mechanical clutch. It's not an electronic clutch, which was, well, I'm not a very big fan of electronic clutches, to be honest. So I'm very grateful it has a mechanical clutch. Now the first setting, or clutch setting number 1, is going to be for your super delicate fasteners, and it does a good job of disengaging for when you are working with those delicate fasteners. And you can adjust it all the way up to the high setting, which is 24, which is going to be great for drilling into, well, those harder substances. And this drill should be able to handle just about anything that a typical household drill is capable of drilling into. So at the end of the day, the clutch is a good clutch in my opinion, and you have plenty of settings in between 1 and 24 to choose from. About the only real downside to the clutch on this particular drill is the fact there isn't a whole lot of area to grip it, and the gripping area is rather smooth, so it can be kind of easy for your hands to slip off or not be able to grip it properly. But other than that, it's not really that big of a deal, and if you're wearing any sort of grippy gloves, you won't have an issue. Okay, moving on. And next up we have the chuck. Now this chuck is a 1/2-inch chuck, and it features a plastic exterior with metal internals. I personally prefer having the plastic exterior because I think it looks better over time. The all metal chucks just have a way of losing all their paint and looking like crap after the first couple of uses. So I'm not a huge fan of having metal chucks, at least not when it comes to the externals. Internals, definitely metal internals, so don't get me wrong there. I will say that this is an older drill, and so it doesn't feature the latest and greatest in chuck technology. It doesn't feature a ratcheting chuck, is basically what I'm saying. The newest generation of Ryobi drill drivers features the ratcheting chuck, and that really is a very nice feature. So if you do end up purchasing this drill, just be aware that this does not feature the ratcheting chuck, and you're really going to have to make sure that it is tight in order to make sure that drill bit doesn't fall out, and you might have to periodically just tighten it up again. But other than that, it really doesn't have any shortcomings. I've never had to replace it, and it's held up just fine for the years of use that I put on the particular drill driver. And this actually is one of the drill drivers I use the most, simply because of where I keep it. Now, at the end of the day, would I say that the ratcheting chuck is a, well, not having the ratcheting chuck is a deal breaker? No, not really. I think this is still a good drill driver, and it has several other features that I think make up for that difference in capability. So yeah, moving on. The drill without a battery weighs 1,229 grams, which is over 2.5 pounds. And with a 4 amp hour battery, the drill driver weighs 1,932 grams, which is over 4 pounds. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this drill and how it performs. Overall, I really don't have any complaints when it comes to, well, drilling holes for wood screws. I don't usually have to do anything with lag bolts or anything like that, so if you're looking for an extreme test, I'm probably not the person to watch for that. I'm generally drilling tons and tons of holes for wood screws or deck screws or construction screws, you get the point. Screws that aren't that big. And this drill does a good job. It has plenty of power in speed too, and it will be able to pick up all the speed you need, and it does it in a fairly timely manner. and as long as you're using a good drill bit, you're not going to have any issues. I haven't really run into an issue with this drill overheating either, so I've been fairly happy with just the overall performance. Now, this particular drill isn't going to be your shortest drill for fitting into tight spaces, but it's not the worst either. I think that tile probably goes to the Ryobi, well, I think it's the P209. That drill was insanely long, and the motor in it wasn't that good either as far as I'm concerned. This particular drill has been fantastic though, and I've been using it for years at this point, and considering that I actually ended up buying this drill used at a pawn shop, it's held up great. And this isn't the only P208 that I own. I actually bought another one and gifted it to a family member who's been using it quite a bit as well. So quite frankly, I've been fairly impressed with just how well this particular model of drill holds up. Now, when you're purchasing any tool used, you could obviously get a lemon, and you should always test your drills before you get them. And pawn shops don't usually have a very long return window. It's usually 24 hours or less, or till the end of the business day. So you always have to be careful, but I've been very happy and I've been very lucky with these particular drills. And they've held up great. I've been using this drill for years at this point, and this is the drill I keep out in my workshop that isn't as secure as where I keep the rest of my power tools. And it is usually the drill I reach for out there simply because, well, that's the only drill out there. Well, and the fact it's so reliable. I've been using this drill for ages at this point, and I actually bought this drill to finish a job that a Makita that I had burned up on, and I was able to finish the job just fine. Oh, did I mention that Makita was a brand new Makita? I'm still a little bit bitter about that one. So, at the end of the day, I'm really happy with just how well this particular drill has been working, and I have to say that if you're looking for a backup drill, or if you don't use drills all the time but you just want to have one that's reliable and that will last, or if you just need a loaner drill, this is a great candidate for that, and it has quite a few features on there that some of the newer Ryobis don't have. And there's one major feature that is missing from this drill, and that's the ratcheting chuck, but I don't think it's technically that big of an issue, although it is a nice issue. But at the end of the day, I really do like this particular drill, and this is definitely my old faithful when it comes to drills. So yeah, let's move on to the pros and cons. And first up, 18 volt. 18 volt means it's going to be compatible with all of Ryobi's 18 volt batteries, and you'll be able to adapt batteries over from other brands via third-party adapter fairly easily. So quite frankly, that's a pro in my opinion. Durable. Overall, this has been a very durable drill. I bought it used, I kept it out in the greenhouse with high humidity, and, well, quite frankly, I've dropped it numerous times, and I've been using it a ton. So, quite frankly, the fact this thing is still working is actually fairly impressive to me. So, at the end of the day, I think it's a durable drill, and I think it will last. Bit holder. I love the bit holder. I think it's a super useful feature, and I don't have any complaints about it. I know some people don't seem to like it, but for me personally, I love it, and this has it, so I love it. Magnet. The mag tray on this particular tool is fantastic. It's so useful for throwing small screws or bits into, and they generally stay put just fine. So I would consider that to be a pro. Runtime. Overall, the runtime with this particular drill is fairly decent. I almost always have a 1.5 battery in there, and it will last me through a project or two before I usually end up having to, well, switch the battery out. So overall, I've been fairly happy with the runtime, and considering this uses a brushed motor and it's not brushless, I am fairly impressed with just how well it works. And the first meh is the level. The level is an interesting feature. I just never use it, and it just isn't all that great in my opinion. Some people might find it useful, but for me it's just kind of meh. LED. I'm glad there's an LED, but it's not as bright as it could be, and it's just kind of meh. And the first con is discontinued. Yes, this drill has been discontinued, meaning you won't be able to find one at your local Home Depot. But if you look around on eBay or Amazon, you probably will be able to find one in fairly good condition for a reasonable price. I wouldn't pay too much for this particular drill unless maybe it was brand new and it's still below the original retail price. But at the same time, I still think this is a decent drill to look at getting for a backup simply because of how durable it is and the features that it has. Long. Overall, this isn't the longest drill in the market. That honor probably goes to something from Craftsman or possibly the Ryobi P209. But this is still longer than some of Ryobi's newer drills, and so that will make it a little bit tricky getting into tight spaces. Although I will say that it hasn't been that big of an issue for me with this particular drill. So at the end of the day, that is a downside, but it's not that big of a downside. And next up we have no belt clip. Yeah, there's no belt clip, and that is a bummer because the belt clips can be useful for attaching accessories as well as the clip itself. So that is a downside to this particular drill. And last but not least, old chuck. The chuck design on this particular particular tool is old. It doesn't feature the ratcheting mechanism, and so there's a decent chance that if you're using this a ton, the bit will eventually become loose and fall out. So that is a downside of this particular tool. And that is it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this particular drill. I don't know, I sort of have a soft spot for this drill. I don't know if it's just because it's been so durable over the years, or the fact that when I first got it, it got me out of a jam after a drill I had been using had burned up. So, for whatever reason, I just like this drill. I like the way it looks, I like the size, I like the features, I like how durable it is. I don't know, I just like this drill. Now, I wouldn't say it's better than some of the newest and greatest drills from Ryobi. Some of them are more powerful and more compact, have some really nice features like the ratcheting chuck and just more power. But at the end of the day, this is still a very useful drill, and if you can pick one up at a reasonable price, I would recommend picking one up just to have one, just because of how durable it is. So if you can find one for a reasonable price, this drill comes highly recommended. And that is it for this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. God bless.